So yeah, hello, I'm Zach. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the work that we do at Helpfully as we help our clients pursue elegant, beautiful products and services that they can launch out into the world. But I want to start with a quick story about the beginning of mobile computing, and it has to do with a beautiful block of wood. In the 1990s, a guy named Jeff Hawkins started to carry around this actual block of wood in his pocket as he went through his day. He took the block of wood with him in the morning when he left. He put it into his pocket. He carried it with him to meetings. He took it out and pretended like it was a computer. Because Jeff went on to found Palm Computing, and it launched, of course, us into the world that we live in today. And I want to tell you that story not because it's a great example of prototyping, it's a great example also of constraints. The constraints that Jeff was operating under were really specific. And I'm just going to give you two of them today as we sort of get started in thinking about how do we become more elegant kinds of problem solvers. So, what are the constraints of this block of wood as he's carrying around in his pocket? And he built this teeny fake stylus, and it didn't do anything. It's a block of wood. And he actually went around and in this very embarrassing way took it out at a meeting and said, yes, I would like to make an appointment with you. And it's very awkward, right? And he was testing two things. First, the constraint of size. And he is a .com guy in the Silicon Valley in the 1990s, so he's wearing this dorky blue shirt, and he's asking a specific question about the size of the product. And it was so important to him that it fit into the pocket of his shirt or of his jacket. Why? Because that was what was going to change things, and it was a huge problem for the technology side of the product as it was developed that forced them to make all of these underpowered, under-batteried choices, right? They had to balance getting that thing to stick in a pocket instead of making it powerful enough to actually accomplish the mobile computing needs of the day. And another constraint, does it work? Can you actually do something, take it out, and use it in your day-to-day life? The social matters around product design are almost as important, right, as those technology constraints that we all live under. So I'm Zach Pousman. My company is called Helpfully. We've been a kind of product team for hire, as David mentioned, for many companies in the US, both very large and companies you've never heard of that are very small, at least for now. So I want to talk today about elegance, and I want to start off with a definition, and I want to start off that definition with a bunch of great examples, right? What are we talking about when we talk about elegance? I think it's a far better term than delightful. Delightful is not enough for me. I want to go past that. I want to go beyond that. And I want to show you guys the framework that we use to describe, to talk about, and to take our clients towards elegant products. I'm going to start with examples, and I'm going to start with those examples and the way that there are these constraints that affect how those products come to life. I'll start with something I think we can all agree, beautiful, elegant product, the Nest. But what's beautiful about it is not just the physical, the industrial design of that thing, this thermostat that hangs on your wall. What's also great about it is the way they dealt with a bunch of interesting constraints, right? They had this constraint of a teeny tiny screen. It's about 1 inch. They have a constraint where, since they want to control that thing from the internet, from your phone, they need to build hardware that allows infinite flexibility. It's never off or on like a switch. The little spinny control has to be spinning even if you're editing it from the phone or if you're editing it in person. There's a constraint about hiding the complexity, right? A constraint on the data and the sensors that are needed. And then as another constraint that they had and dealt with was the machine learning about how does a thermostat learn the rhythms and routines of householders so they can actually deliver the service. And what's great about these constraints is there are some constraints they did not have. No constraint on price. So this thing costs about 10x what a regular thermostat costs in the United States. And they just removed, right, constraints in order, right, to accomplish their goal. Let me give another example. Let's go back in time, an ugly example. I think this is a beautiful, elegant product. I feel like Craigslist is incredibly powerful at negotiating some of the constraints they had. When Craig Newmark founded Craigslist, any Craigslisters in the audience? A couple? Not as popular in Budapest, it seems. So Craigslist is a website where you go and you can find out things and buy stuff from strangers on the internet. It's an early on kind of social network. And it built a very strong community. One of the constraints they built was very simple to administer. All of the content, everything behind every one of these links comes from the users. So this is the dating side of it, the selling side of it, discussion forums, jobs postings, all of that content is crowdsourced. So when Craig started the website, he couldn't create all that content. So he said, oh, I'd like all of you, the public, right, to go and create it. So that made it very simple to administer. And a constraint is it must be in every single city, right? So there are many of these. This one is from a small town in New York, but there is New York City, San Francisco, Budapest as well. A constraint was that it was going to be free to use and no ads at all. Totally free for everyone in any city. How does it happen? There are actually just a very small number of cities in which Craigslist takes money for job postings and for real estate listings. Because in Silicon Valley in the United States, real estate is crazy. And so this one link that says housing apartments shared in San Francisco and New York, and I think in one other city, I think it's LA, they charge money to post on the rental listings, and they charge money for job posts in those three cities. Everything else, for every other city and every other place, it's free for everyone all the time. They don't take any money. There's no such thing as ads. I think it's really cool because it's beautiful in the way that they apply constraints to their design problem. It looks very different, but I think a good example. I think this is a beautiful example of elegance in product. This is a dark pattern from Facebook. A friend of mine, Jenny Michelle, tagged me in a photo. See the photo. I want to see the photo, right? Everyone does. And I believe, and I don't have inside knowledge about Facebook and how this feature works, but I'm pretty sure that this has nearly 100% click-through rates because people are vain. The constraint here is on human vanity. People want to see themselves, and they want to project a certain identity into the world. They want to be seen a certain way, and they don't want to be seen looking weird in a photo at the wrong place or with the wrong people or holding the wrong beer at a business meeting, right? They have desires about those photos, and they have to control who sees what about them. So this constraint on human vanity is really interesting because this, as you might imagine, is like an infinite resource. Human vanity is such a powerful force for us, and you can use that in the products that you design. Human attention, how powerful Facebook became at getting into your email box in addition, right, to the website and to your phone. So they were looking at the constraint of how do we use new channels. And of course they have this monetization and these loyalty loops and these growth loops for the product, right? And they were thinking about those constraints. The business model was one of the constraints they used to build this feature. I'll give one last example and then we'll jump into the definition I want to just sketch out for you today. Last example is the Lambda School. New thing in the United States. Works like this. Lambda School trains people online to be software engineers at no upfront cost. The constraint is you only pay for the schooling that you get to become a developer if you go and get a job that pays very well. So it's free up to all through the schooling. It's free while you were looking for a job, and once you get a job, they get paid, right? So they flip them up. And I love this idea about changing, right, the elegance not just of how the product looks or how their website looks, but the way that they've couched the business model here. And I think also another nice constraint is to, how do they interact and how do they compete against the other players in the space, other universities, other programs that a student might attend. And I think another last constraint in this case is about, making sure that they remain legal and approved in the United States. So there are many rules, and oftentimes we work right in these domains that are controlled, not just by the whims of the startup, but also by regulators, by administrators, by government bodies, right, who have rules about what should or shouldn't happen in a particular place. Those are specific constraints, and I want us all to be really mindful of them in the work that we do. So I think defining elegance is about creating new products or changing the products that you guys work on every day to fit like a glove, given the constraints in the world. And I think when I describe how to build more elegant products, how to build products that achieve these kinds of goals of that perfect fit inside the constraints, is to be simple and powerful, to be coherent, and to be comfortable. I've been looking into lots of people working on this. This is some older work that predates mine, but I think helped me sort of get my head around how do we get beyond delightful and towards something that is elegant in the way that it satisfies human need and satisfies all these other aspects and all these other dimensions of the work. So when you think about simple, I think that one's pretty easy to imagine. This is a zero-click ordering tool from Domino's. So you launch the app, and if 10 seconds go by, it orders you the pizza. There's no clicks at all. Right, why have one click when you can have no clicks? It's just a timer, yeah, so anyway. Simplicity is something that we all can see from far away, right? It's a way for us to look at a product and say, how difficult would it be to use? You can see that from across the room, right, in a lot of cases. But of course, right, simple needs to be matched with powerful. So I think the example here is about the economy, the return on power for the given investment. So I love if this then that, and there's a corporate version of this called Zapier. Zapier and if this then that allow you to glue together pieces of the internet in new ways in order to accomplish your goals. They are quite powerful, not as simple as the no-click ordering, but I think powerful because they give you a language to do things that you couldn't, right? They give a user superpowers. This one is, I think, really good in like domestic space. It's much more focused on regular daily life, and Zapier much more focused on professional life, right? The life you need to glue together various APIs from all the products and services that your company may use. I want to talk a little bit about coherence. The idea that not just are they simple and powerful, but that it hangs together as one big thought, right? There's a beauty and an elegance, right, to the way that a product is connected to all of its pieces. And I think the example that we're all looking at today, of course, are all of these design systems. So looking at design systems, I think, is a way for us to look at a coherent view of your product, of your service, and of the thing you're building. I do want to make just a point. I'm going around talking to everyone about this. The coherence in your design system is not just the UI components. So what we're looking at here is just the component library. But I think there's so much more to the argument and more to elegance than just making sure that all the buttons match. This is about something broader than that. And I think many design systems fall short of being truly elegant because they're just focused on that very small piece. They're focused on the button and not on the way in which those patterns come to life. And the last thing I want to talk about is comfortable to use. So I have one side here about the physical side of use. How tall is a person? How wide is the span of your hand? This is about the comfort, right, that you have as a user. And this is in the industrial design world called ergonomics. The science of knowing how far will it be to be comfortable as you press this pedal, right, to the ground. And then on the other side, of course, the cognitive model, the match between what's in your head of how the world might work and the way the system implements that understanding in a cognitive model. So this is a nice definition just for cognitive model or mental model, this sort of small-scale model of external reality. You carry it around with you in the world, and you use it, right, to solve your problems. And I just have a couple here, just, so let's see what some of them look like. We actually spend a lot of our time at Helpfully thinking about these mental models, the models for how your product or service works in that elegant, coherent way. Should our system be a mentor? Should it be the Sherpa? Should it be the concierge or the coach? All of those are slightly different mental models, have different expressions in the world. I'll just take 1 second and say, I want to also just show 2 quick examples about what elegance is not. Elegance is not just personality. A lot of the moves that have been made as products have become more delightful, as people have thought about, oh, I want to build a product that people can fall in love with our experience. They say, oh, well, let's give it a personality. And I'll give you the example, at least from Atlanta, Georgia, where we're from. The most personalitied product that I could think of in recent memory, MailChimp. It's a email automation platform. It allows you to send nicely crafted, beautiful emails to all of the people on your lists, and you can use it, right, to power your marketing, to power your product. But it also comes with all of this personality. This is Freddie. He is the MailChimp chimp, and he's a chimpanzee who is in the app, and it was for a long time this complicated story. He has this very big backstory, and he's inside of the product helping you because he's a chimp who helps you send mail. And he has tons of personality. But I don't think that personality gets you to elegance, right? I think this is good. I think having a personality is wise. But I just want to make sure that we understand maybe a distinction here between setting up products that have some personality, that talk a certain way, that have some expression of their identity, but that is not just, or that is not enough to get us to elegance. I think another thing that is just a hot topic, and companies ask me about it all the time, and they say, oh, we want to design and craft these beautiful, small micro animations for the product experience. So MailChimp is one way with this big personality and a lot of backstory to that, and a lot of pieces of the UX are controlled by that Freddie MailChimp framing. And then you've got the micro animation side of things where it's like, oh, the thing that matters so much is the way in which each of these moments, right, unfolds. So those are beautiful, and they are so powerful at keeping a person's attention and letting them know where a particular piece of information or data has come from and where it's going to. So I think these are useful, valuable, but these are not, by definition, elegant. This is not only a move to elegance. And I think another example that I want to talk through is like, oh, we'll check the box. So I don't want you to leave the talk and think, aha, I will go back to my company and I will tell them, now we will make elegant products. This is a good idea. We should definitely do more of it. And then you'll just claim that the thing you're doing now is elegant. So I'll give you a quick example. We've spent a lot of time working at a US grocery store, big grocery chain. And we asked them, oh, as you think about all the new digital things that should happen in the grocery world, do you have a customer journey? Do you have this model for how the customer comes to experience? And we were just getting the work off the ground. It was this big meeting, and I said, oh, can you send us, or can you share with us one of the facets of how the system should work? So send us your customer journey. Oh, we don't need to send it to you, they tell me. I'll just draw it on the board for you. And so he goes to the whiteboard with a marker, and he's just going to draw me the customer journey. And this concerns me because customer journeys should be broad and complete. They should map, right, the whole experience that someone has. And I was like waiting, worried, getting scared. And then this is what he drew on the board. People have, oh, our customer journey has 2 steps. Shopping in the store or getting ready to go shopping. And that's the whole world. And I was curious about this. And I was a brand new meeting, a brand new client. And I didn't know what to do, and I didn't laugh, which I wanted to laugh. I do not believe that this is the mental model that people have. I do not believe this is your journey. I was really scared, and I said, oh, what we need to do is go and validate your customer journey. What we need is more data. Because this model is plausible. It might be real. But I'm pretty sure that the tiny proportion of the week you spend doing each of these two things, it's very minuscule, right? I think the amount of time I spend doing the shopping for my house in Atlanta must be 2 hours maximum per week, 2.5, maybe. Giving them every possible credit. For every shop that we do in a grocery store, this is less than 5%. And then how much time do we spend preparing to shop? So the model that they were using was about checking this box, like we have a customer journey. We understand what users need and want. We'll understand what customers desire. And if this were true, all of us right now in this room are preparing to go grocery shopping. But this is not right. I was like, I don't agree. So one of the things, of course, that we tell people all the time, get out of the building. You must, in order to build an elegant product, you have a presumption, you have assumptions in your heads about how users do behave, about what people need and want, about when and where they go grocery shopping, but you need to go out into the world, right, to learn. So instead of laughing, I said, hey, let us commission some research about the customer journeys that people are on. So we got to go and do these shop-alongs, these ride-along research pieces to go and uncover, right, what's really happening. So I want to talk a little bit about the constraints, because I think that these are so powerful as you go back to your product and you think about the way to apply this kind of thinking. So constraints are some built in, right? They are intrinsic in the world. I've already discussed some of the constraints are legal or economic, or the constraints of your particular business model, either a SaaS product or something that you sell one time, something that you sell repeatedly, right, over time. Of course, you'll need to talk about the technical constraints. What are those constraints you have for the product or service that you're building or have in the world? We talked about ergonomic. I think it's also very valuable to talk about the social constraints of the product that you're building. We oftentimes assume that people are rational, and they spend much of their time in their own heads, solving real problems. But a lot of the work, of course, that people do is down here in the belly, up here in the heart, and we need to think about the social realities that people have. So we also have timing as a constraint. The constraint is, does your product work in such a way that you get to control how much time people spend? Or is it something that people interleave into many other activities in their life? You may have constraint on the aesthetics, and aesthetics may matter. The brand may very much matter. The way that the product looks may be something that is a constraint for you. And then, of course, the constraint of your team. So I think it's very useful when you go back to have these conversations about the constraints in your world. You are honest about what the team can and can't do. How big is that team? What skills do you have in-house? What skills do you need to go outside and borrow, hire, acquire a partner, right, to solve for you? So designing for elegance for me is just 3 things. Simple prescription. I think it's really important to name your constraints, describe them in a very clear way, put them on paper so that the entire team can actually understand them. Because what we're going to do is then use that understanding to navigate the constraints. Oftentimes, companies want to fight with the constraints. They want to fight against them and say, well, we're prevented from doing this, or this is a wall we cannot cross. But instead, I want to talk about how do we embrace those constraints. And then I think also just a piece of nice advice about elegance is to pick an altitude at which you want to fly. So I'm going to dig into each of those. One of the product design workshops that we always run with clients is about discussing in detail the constraints of a product. So I'll show you one of those tools we use. Looks like this. We use a timescale model for how the product lives and works. And we actually spend a lot of time discussing what is the product experience across the menus, across one interaction. What does this mean for you, for your company, for your business, and for your product? What is a session, a successful or unsuccessful session inside of the product? And we make our client teams, whether they're product owners, product managers, we use the designers, developers, we're bringing everyone together to this to talk about, when we talk about a session, how long does it take? How long should it take? How long is it taking today? And what is our vision, right, for each of these moments? And in most of our cases, as I'll discuss, clients pick a small number of these to really dig in on, to really decide, okay, this is going to be the critical part of our product design. We talk about naming them. We have people write down, hey, let's talk about all those constraints. Usually that's not a small list, right? Usually it's quite a big list. And then we go through, prioritize, and clarify, oh, I'm not sure that is a constraint for us. Or how sure are we that human vanity, for example, is an infinite resource? So we unpack them, and I love this idea of navigating the constraints and not just trying to beat them into submission. One of the things that I think we as designers think, and I'm sure, you know, when I work with product teams, constraints are often, when we first start this conversation, they're thought of as bad, right? They're thought of as dangerous, and they're thought of as limiting. They keep us, right, from our goal. But I love the idea to find ways, right, to embrace the constraints in your product. I'll give an example of a product. I did not build this video. It's quite nice. We're working a lot in the healthcare space, and so one of the constraints for healthcare in the United States is nobody knows how it works at all. There's no explanation that comes with. So this is a startup based in New York City called Oscar, and they built a book that helps you understand both their service, but also the broad realities of, like, what is the US healthcare system? How do I pay for this? How do I alleviate my frustration as a customer of healthcare? And I know that in some countries, being a customer of healthcare is not a real thing, but in the US, this is a real thing. We spend a lot of time as customers and not as patients. They also send you these cute little Band-Aids, which I think is quite nice. And one of the things that we talk about when we're talking about discussing constraints, and especially in the healthcare space, is just a little sentence I like called, "Bitchin' ain't switchin'." So this is about complaining. And one of the things we find when we're looking at healthcare right now is people complain a lot. And in the United States, I would say, as a culture, we get so much value, cultural currency from complaining. Complaining is just the way of our world. It's too hot, it is too cold, my team has lost the sporting event of my choice, my family is complaining to me, and I am a frustrated person. We spend a lot of time in this world of complaints. And the complaints that people give are not actual evidence that they're going to switch to your product or solution. So many people will complain about the state of healthcare in the United States, but that does not necessarily mean they're going to switch. So the complaining is a good signal that there's frustration or friction, but it does not necessarily mean that you're going to get people to switch. And then I think once you have this nice map, and once you've picked some places where the constraints are going to matter, is how do you connect the two? So it's really valuable to clearly define those constraints so you can play games with your product team and the engineering team about, oh, well, we need X, Y, and Z to happen, or we have X, Y, and Z technical problem that we need to solve, and you can actually match those constraints together, drawing, if you can, a whole bunch of arrows right between them that connect the constraints from one another. Because the powerful things that I showed you in those examples actually connect the constraints. Because the screen is small on the Nest thermostat, that forced, right, a decision about how much battery was going to be needed or how much of the system was going to be able to be controlled in the product itself. The Nest far prioritizes doing a lot of upfront work to set up the system and get it up and running. But once up and running, there's no maintenance, no worry, no configuration, right, that's needed. But that's a choice, right? And so they talked about these constraints as a team. And I think I want to talk a little bit just at the end here about picking the altitude for product impact, right? We have all these tiny things that we could do, and we have these huge, huge, huge desires. So the tactical execution of your particular constraint, the way in which those buttons move or the way in which animations happen is, I think, awesome. But then, of course, our eventual intention, of course, is to change the world. And so a model I like is, when we talk to product teams, we talk about how do we assign them work. And do we say, hey, product team, go and implement these buttons, just like this? Do we say, here's a user flow that we wish to see in the world? Are we going to help users accomplish a task X? Are we going to generate some business outcome? Or are we going to change the way people do a thing all of the time? And I think the question about elegance is great because it allows us to see the connection line, right, between all of these topics. And it allows us to pick, I think, places to intervene. And my recommendation is the very best products may be elegant across the entire spectrum, but I think for the beginning of this topic, and I think as you get started in trying to improve the products you're building or launch something great into the world, I think it's so important to pick a particular place in which to be elegant and then stretch, as opposed to try to do each of these all at once at the same time. Right? I think that is a very high bar. I think high-functioning product teams can do such a thing. I think also that that's some element of luck if they manage to nail that all at once. But when you look at the way that Craigslist was able to accomplish their goals, they were looking for a very specific business result. And then, right, the way that it looks is not as important. And they were very focused, right, on the work that they could do in terms of how to be elegant. And they were able to, over time, right, start to accomplish changing the way people look for jobs, changing the way that the whole US economy works. Craigslist wound up putting much of the US newspaper industry out of business because they sucked up all the money out of classified ads, which were in the paper. So they changed, I think, a lot of the world. Another example of this is Tinder, dating app with the swiping. And Tinder is great because they built a UX kind of control, but then that allowed them actually to stretch and really change the way people do things. Right? So I think there are good examples of product elegance inside of each of these bubbles, but I think it's wise to just pick a single one to implement first and then stretch, as opposed to try to move line by line. Or all at once, right, across all these different domains. I want to talk a little bit about product as a superpower. So the work that we do, and when I think these products really succeed at achieving elegance, is when they enable a person, right, to do a thing that they could not do that reflects on their identity as a person. So the product is an enabler of some superpower in the world. It gives you tools, it gives you new levers to accomplish goals that you otherwise would not be able to achieve. I'm going to show one quick slide before I show this. This is a framework that I think is sometimes very helpful to us as well. One of the things that happens in those customer journey conversations or in these conversations about the constraints is the constraints of other products. And I think one thing it's so valuable to do is to go back to your team and say, what other ways do people accomplish this today? What other products are in the world for my user over here? He or she is using so many different products. And when you imagine them as this ecology around our product, around the thing you're building, you can see those constraints at work. So there are emotional or symbolic constraints, or constraints about the aesthetic way that people use beautiful things or things that feel right to them, right, to express something about themselves. And this constrains what they're doing and how they work. We've spent a lot of time not just talking about, right, single user products, but the way that those products ripple out into the world. And I think Casey's talk today was really good at sort of giving us some language for that. But I think, you can't just imagine your product as the only product. So as we go out and we try to build elegant things, we spend time actually discussing not just the product you are building, the features that you have, but we actually look at also the features that other products have that help us know where our product can actually succeed. I think this is a really good conversation to have with you guys. We've been looking at some existing large-scale products that are already out, already working in the world. Can we make an existing product more elegant? Can we find a way to change a conversation about adding features into a conversation about how do we maintain the elegant way that our product solves a problem, or how do we craft something that we feel like is achieving, right, some of these goals that we have. So I think I want to just charge us all, right, to go and do great things with elegance. I think it's so important to build something that is powerful, simple, but also coherent, it hangs together, and that works, right, and is comfortable for users. So yeah, I want to take your questions. John Doe, great question. Product elegance in a nutshell for me is a product that has just enough, right, simple enough, and allows a person, right, to be that superhero. It gives them powerful things they could do, but then without, right, this sort of sense of overbuiltness, right? The sense where as we add features, as we add and add and add to our products, I think oftentimes we take away and take away and take away, chip away, right, at the elegance that they have. So I think that one's good. Anything else?
I think that's it. Thank you very much, Zach.
Yeah.
Round of applause again for Zach.